Okay, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about it, but what's going on with Israel and Gaza and Hamas, it's out there, and new things happen all the time. And I got to tell you, the more I watch and the more I listen, the madder I get. And as you know, one of the things I do with this show, unapologetically, is I vent. So, and I'm not running for office. I learned my lesson there. And this is just me talking. And if you're listening, that's fine. I hope you do. If you're not, well, it doesn't matter. I'm still venting. It's better than talking to the mirror or trying to argue with my dog, which I never win. So this is what I'm doing here. So and what's particularly disturbing is I'm seeing so many people with whom I generally agree politically, like Bill Maher and others on his show, and I just saw this Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, who I generally like, all saying things that just to me are so beyond logic and beyond fact, and are so prejudiced that it really upsets me, because these are people I generally support. And guess what I just found out from a poll? The Democrats are losing a substantial percentage of Democrats over this whole Israeli issue. They're not losing them in the Congress, they're not losing them in the Senate, they're certainly not losing them in the White House, but they're losing them with the rank and file, and particularly the younger voters. And one thing that just drives me like nails on a blackboard is when I hear people, and I heard it on Bill Maher, I love Bill Maher, but he was saying, and he had guests on all agreeing, that the problem with all of these young people who are naive, they don't understand history, and they are supporting the Palestinians and increasingly critical of Israel. And the reason given by all of these people who are now more or less in my age group is ignorance. These kids in college today, they're just ignorance. And I'm like, ding, 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 ding. What am I hearing here? Oh, yeah. I was in college during the Vietnam War. I was in law school in the Vietnam War. And what did I hear, particularly in the early days, in the early 60s? Those of us who opposed the Vietnam War were called ignorant. Trust me, we weren't ignorant. We were un-American. We were pro-communist. We were weak. Same things I'm hearing these people who are now my age saying these things about these kids in school. Well, just as we were right about Vietnam, these kids in school today are right about what's going on in Gaza. They're angry about it. I'm angry about it. And among the things that I hear that just drive me crazy is to equate, and I heard this today on Morning Joe, and another one, equating what's going on between Hamas and Israel to, first of all, to 9/11, which is ridiculous, but more significantly to Hitler, to any time of huge army against army, when good people stood back and let bad people with huge armies go out and just destroy, and they finally ended up in country against country, battle against battle, tanks against tanks, planes against planes. That is not what's going on here, folks. Hamas is not an army. Hamas is a ragtag group of thugs watching these, a lot of them teenagers themselves, out there. When I saw these people in these trucks grabbing Israeli, young women and kids, tying them up in ropes and throwing them in the back of pickup trucks and driving off with them, in the meantime celebrating like they'd done some wonderful thing and aren't they like they were going to a party, it's enough to make you want to throw up. That's terrible. It's also terrible that they have hostages, but they have a few hundred hostages at most. In the meantime, Israel has an air force. Does Hamas have an air force? I have to answer that question. They don't have an air force. They don't have tanks. Israel has tanks. They don't have drones. Israel has drones. They don't have satellite communications. Israel has satellite communications. They don't have a huge army armed to the teeth. Israel has a huge army armed to the teeth. Israel has the United States providing them with our most sophisticated weapons. We provide weapons to Israel of a sophistication that we refuse to give to countries who are helping defeat the Russians in Ukraine. We don't want that technology out there. I know a little something about that technology. I was a patent lawyer for the Air Force. High tech was my specialty when I was there. You know, a lot of my clients were in-house. Well, not with the Air Force, but later when I worked for Intel, were Israeli engineers. I had a lot of my clients when I was a lawyer for Intel who were in Israel. We had intranet in those days. Before internet, with our scientists and engineers in Israel. Brilliant people and good people. But I'm telling you right now, Israel's armed forces, compared to that of Hamas, there's no comparison. It's like an army against a bunch of gang members on the south side of Chicago. There's no comparison. So to sit there and say Israel has to go in and they've got to root out Hamas because it's essential for their survival is bullshit. And if you think that that's true, if you think that destroying and defeating Hamas is essential for Israel's survival, then you don't know anything about history, you don't know anything about armaments, you don't know anything about what's going on in the world today, and you're listening to a bunch of propaganda. And fortunately, these kids, even though they may be getting stuff from TikTok, of which I have a lot of problems for reasons not necessarily related to this, but having related to their relationship with the Chinese government, of which I also know a lot because I've got to spend a lot of time in China. That's a whole different subject, but TikTok is a problem. But they're getting information from lots of sources outside of the mainstream media, and by mainstream media I'm including Fox, which spews this never-ending propaganda. This party line about Israel's got to stop, they've got to stop Hamas to defend themselves. They have to go in and root them out, lock, stock, and barrel, to defend themselves is nonsense. Israel should have defended themselves in the first place by having that border properly maintained with all these armed forces that are going into Gaza now. They could have been along the border. Everybody knows that the Netanyahu government botched this thing completely. So you don't make up for botching something completely by saying, I have to go in to where these people live and root them out. And now they've got this nonsense where they find a hospital. This is the largest hospital in Gaza. They basically have put it out of existence. After having already done that to the other hospitals that are there, they have no fuel, they have no existence, and they've gone in there with soldiers and run these people out of there. And you know what their justification for that is? Well, we found arms. No, not arms and limbs. I know it's a hospital. Stop it with your bad jokes. I'm talking about they found guns. They found handguns, and they found semi-automatic rifles. Semi-automatic rifles and handguns. Oh, and some hand grenades. They found these things in the hospital, stuck around in this hospital. And that means that they had every right and obligation to go in there and kill people. People died in that hospital because of what Israel did. They died in that hospital. Think about that. I mean, so they said, well, this is a major command center. Even if it was a major command center, that's no excuse for what they did. But there's zero evidence that it was a major command center, at least none that's been presented. So they found some guns. And that's it. And therefore it was okay. Well, it's not okay. You realize half the population of Gaza, which is approximately 2 million people, are people under the age of 18. That means that the people who are dying in the rubble of these bombing attacks, is Hamas flying jet planes over Jerusalem and dropping bombs? You know the answer to that. Are they shooting rockets? Well, that's another thing I forgot to mention. Yeah, they're shooting rockets. They shoot rockets at Israel. But most of those rockets don't get through. You know why? Because we provided Israel with an iron dome. They're basically anti-rocket rockets. Does Hamas have anti-rocket rockets? Do the people of Gaza have anti-rocket rockets? When Israel decides to shoot rockets at buildings in Gaza, do the people in Gaza have any way of preventing that? None. They have no way of preventing that. You have this huge Israeli army attacking a country of civilians under the auspices and the nonsense that they have to do this in order to destroy Hamas, because if they can't destroy Hamas, well, they will never be able to exist to have another night's peace. No explanation as to why they couldn't just use those soldiers to patrol the border. No, they want to root them out, in my opinion, to divert attention from Netanyahu's government's complete failure to protect Israel from any attacks coming from Hamas. And the second thing is, I think what they really want to do is do what they are doing, which is drive these people out of their homes. They have no place to go, in hopes that they'll maybe go back to Egypt or something, and Israel can then take it over. In fact, he said they're going to. After this is over, they're going to occupy the West. They're going to occupy Gaza. How close are they to occupying the West Bank? In which case, you do have from the river to the sea, only it's going to be occupied entirely by Israel. And incidentally, that was never part of the 1948 deal, which we could talk about it ad nauseum if you want to. But since I'm doing all the talking, and I don't want to go there now because it's going to divert me far too much from what we're talking about, because I'm talking about what's going on right now today, not what happened in 1907 or 1917 rather, 1947 and 48, and even in 1860. All of that is background which at some point in time you should learn. You should understand what's going on over there, because we run the risk right now of being dragged into a world war over this thing. We're already fighting now, actively fighting militarily in all kinds of areas in the Middle East where we haven't had a problem for years. I don't know, it's a mess. So, I'm calmed down a little bit now, but it's infuriating when I hear this kind of propaganda pushed out all the time by the mainstream media, Republicans and Democrats, office holders, and people who hold positions of power in this country, pushing that. In the meantime, younger people are not getting that message. Black people don't like it, and so Biden's very well going to lose this election to Donald Trump because these people will just stay home. They'll discuss it with the Democratic Party, just as when I was in college. I was, loved John Kennedy, supported Lyndon Johnson because he was John Kennedy's vice president, although I never much liked him. But we turned against the Democratic Party, the establishment of the Democratic Party, vehemently. The only thing that brought me back was Bobby Kennedy. But it's, you don't get a pass just because you're a Democrat. And it's almost always the big difference between where people are liberal on every issue. And by liberal, I'm using that term in the traditional sense, i.e. Roosevelt Kennedy liberalism, not progressive or whatever they want to call this stuff today. I'm talking about traditional, modern Democrats like myself. We're right in step with all of these people as it comes to all the liberal issues until we get to Israel, and then there's a break. There's a break between the establishment Democrats and those of us who are not establishment Democrats, and that includes a lot of young people who are just looking at this thing. They generally agree with the Democrats on principles. They really don't like what Donald Trump stands for and what the Republican Party today stands for. Most people don't. But on the other hand, they're not going to sit back there and say, well, this is okay that the civilians in Gaza, particularly the children, are being blown to bits. And on this hostage thing, I want to get back, because this is another thing that's in my craw. It's terrible that there are hostages being held there. But almost every time somebody talks to a strong Israeli supporter and says, what are you people doing in Gaza? That person comes back and says, isn't it terrible that they have all these hostages? Well, let's put things in perspective again. This attack by Hamas occurred in one day. A few hundred hostages were taken, and that was it. After that day, it's all been Israel. This thing from Israel attacking Gaza, and by Gaza, I mean civilians in Gaza, and I've heard one person say, but I think the real Israeli view is, all the Gazians are guilty of this, because they elected Hamas in the first place. They support Hamas. They supported, when Hamas attacked Israel. Not that we know that. Now I think that's true. Initially, we don't know how many people in Gaza actually knew what happened there. But it's this, how horrible it is that these hostages were taken. Anytime someone tries to talk to one of these people about what's going on to the children in Gaza, and the only response I hear that wherever addresses that particular says, well, the Hamas thugs came across the border and they targeted civilians. And that's true. And that's disgusting. And that's disgusting. And the people who did it, like I said, seeing some of these kids who are basically thugs, having a great time while they're inflicting misery on other people, that's revolting. But that was a one-day thing. They took a few hundred hostages. They left, and ever since then, Israel's been out there bombing the crap out of Gaza. And it's true, the Israelis, there's no evidence that the Israeli army is targeting children. What difference does it make? You're dropping a bomb or shooting a rocket or bringing a tank into an area where you're going right after either Hamas known to be, or Hamas tunnels, or Hamas communication. Well, you're going right at that and ignoring the fact that your tank has to roll over the bodies of children to get there. I don't care if it's deliberate or if it's just they don't care and are willing to do it anyway. The result is the same. And if you're a parent whose child was killed by the Israeli army, or you're a child whose parents were killed, you don't think those people are going to hate Israel forever? That's why this thing keeps going on the way it does. And I think Netanyahu is correct in thinking that if he doesn't really do something to totally emasculate Gaza and the Gazian people, that he's going to have to deal with the hate coming back from that country forever. Forever. So that's it. I'm just venting, but I'm particularly venting about the fact that the Democrats are losing young people, and these young people are not stupid. Now, there is some anti-Semitism going on in there. That's bad. But that brings me to my next question. What's anti-Semitism? I saw some Jewish Democrat the other day talking, and everything she said I was agreeing with, until she got to the subject of anti-Semitism. And then she said, well, that's where we have to draw the line, is anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism is a terrible thing. I'm saying, yeah, I agree. I'm not saying it out loud. I'm saying it to myself and my dog. And then she says, and then this person was conducting the interview, said, well, what's anti-Semitism? She says, well, hatred of Jews just for being Jews. I mean, I'm with you on that one. You hate somebody because of their DNA? Excuse me. So, but then she said, and if you're somebody who thinks that that Israel is not, the Jews are not entitled to a homeland of their own in their own country, then that crosses the line, and that's anti-Semitism. And I'm saying to myself, well, it wasn't anti-Semitism before 1948, but now it's anti-Semitism? It has nothing to do with your DNA. It has to do with, she said, well, that's not political. Well, of course it's political. What do you think it is? If you think Israel has a right to exist as a country in land that was previously occupied by somebody else, you don't think that's political? Now, I'm not saying that that's right, that the decision by the UN in 48 was right or wrong. I'm saying to equate your views on that issue with anti-Semitism is a complete distortion of the view of anti-Semitism. So when I hear people talk about, well, there's all this anti-Semitism on college campuses, I have to ask myself, and I do, since fortunately I'm not back on a college campus anymore, other than to go to an occasional football game, which we can talk about Michigan football later. Now, later, George, you're not even going to be in the House of Representatives, so stop acting like you're all that in a bag of chips, all right? So we're talking here about the significance of of what does anti-Semitism mean. So by anti-Semitism, you mean you think the Palestinians should be restored to their original homeland, and if you think that Israel is wrong in doing what it's doing, if you think from the river to the sea, which incidentally doesn't mean the destruction of Israel or the killing of all the Jewish people, this goes back to the previous accords, which were unsuccessful, where Palestinians wanted just a land bridge to connect Gaza to the West Bank. And you need to know something about the geography of Israel, and if you don't, you should go look at that before you listen to this anymore. But from the river to the sea, from the Palestinian perspective, at least traditionally, has not meant the destruction of Israel. It just means having a land bridge connecting them so that they can have one contiguous area, which we say, this is Palestine. But Israel has taken the position that it really is entitled to all of that land in there, and if you disagree with that, then you're anti-Semitic. So when they say there's anti-Semitism on college campuses, we got to stop this anti-Semitism. They confuse the issue by conflating support for Israel's policies, or even Israel's right to exist, or the right of Israeli settlers to do what they're doing. They equate all of those, opposition to those things, with anti-Semitism. Some people do. So when I hear there's anti-Semitism, I don't know if you're talking about what I consider real anti-Semitism, which is being against somebody because of their race, with anti-Semitism based on, well, you don't like the politics of the Jewish nation. That's a whole different thing. So until somebody tells me that this is the anti-Semitism they're talking about, I don't know how much anti-Semitism there is out there. But I certainly know that people have the right to think that Israel's in the wrong on this, and more people are seeing it that way. The more and more things that Israel does, including what they've been doing in these hospitals, is just outrageous. So those are my thoughts. I hope you don't take offense by this if I've said anything that offended you. But as you know, I just call them as I see them, and on that particular issue, it's how I see it, and it's how more and more people are seeing it, based not on a predisposition or prejudice toward anything, but simply an objective looking at the unfortunate and actually tragic facts that are occurring there right now.